Welcome back to the Techno-Communism Conversation. I'm your host, Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. You might observe from that nom de guerre that I have a different worldview from perhaps some of the people who I'll describe in a roundabout way in this show. This is a show recommending major works of revolutionary thought of a few different subgenres. I'm not going to talk at length about the works to do with Palestine. For one simple reason that you can go to almost any serious thinker's Twitter page and maybe find an analysis of that kind there. I am going to post links to audiobooks so that you can listen to some of those works, however. Major works of Norman Finkelstein, Pap, writer of comparable stature, Edward Said, and I'm going to post about a dozen other such writers. Leila Khaled, who's still living. Edward Said is passed. The other two are still living. But I'm also going to recommend other major works of a more general kind to do with liberation and scientific socialist thought. My thinking here is to provide audiobooks for the best works to introduce one to revolutionary thought of this kind. As no revolutionary action, as it's not closely tied to liberation, and there's no liberation movement that more indicative of that in the early 21st century than the movement for a free Palestine. However, another part of my thinking here in presenting these other works besides those of the dozen or so authors that I just mentioned or alluded to is there's no liberation or revolution at all without a serious analysis on the part of a lot of people, which does not tend to exist at present, of revolutionary actions of the past, which have only been successful when they are rooted in a liberation and revolutionary thinking, and the only people who have done that analysis consistently at the highest level would be people who we would characterize as scientific socialists, scientific communists. And when you can track in the course of the 20th century, for example, and it's not the worst example of this, but you can track the rise of political Islam as opposed to a disconnected or secular Islam as a controlled opposition propped up by the people who would tend to characterize themselves as the enemies of it, and perhaps no person of the 20th and early 21st century would better characterize this and say Osama bin Laden. This is a response to the degradation of so much of the world by empire and financial capital. But the point being, you may have an example where a country becomes free, but if there is still a critical mass of bourgeois institutions and bourgeois ideology in that country, then it's not actually going to stay free. And it's not fair to single out one country or another. All of the many examples of this happening are the result of the forces of a more international kind, and U.S.-led kind specifically, imposing that upon the world. But there's no way around it. So much so that a good example of this would be the Soviet Union itself, that first major foray into state socialism, and there's been so many books that I could link here, but I'm going to keep this to about maybe 20 or 30 audiobook links on this thread. So many works that have been written of some kind of post-mortem analysis of the USSR, or works from earlier decades in some way critical of the USSR, but from a legitimately scientific socialist perspective. And I don't generally, am not going to go out of my way to recommend works of that kind, but it's important to note that in the context of what I was saying a moment ago, the only thing really state socialists of the early 20th century did wrong, of course no place is perfect, you could point to other things, but the real major thing that they did wrong was not doing the thing that I said, which is eliminating completely in every place the bourgeois institution and ideology. And so you have this kind of recidivism occurring in every place until such time as the true enlightenment of the working people of the world occurs, and the bourgeois institutions are dismantled below this critical mass where they have geopolitical significance. And that sounds like a big ambition, but if you watch this show, you know that I am a firm believer in a set of ideas that we could call revolutionary cybernetic socialist thought. And so I believe that the most essential thing I could say about that is that advanced computing, so-called artificial intelligence, is the most powerful revolutionary weapon in human history, and its growth and proliferation, even in bourgeois contexts, which makes it a danger to humankind. But nevertheless, it's grown into a weapon of incalculable power. And my focus on this techno-communist conversation, a series of live streams, has been to talk about how to use a particular early instantiation, perhaps, of this power, the machine learning based large language model of an open source kind, which is rounding a corner from its earliest uses as it emerged around 2023 as a basically a moderately skillful writing assistant to becoming something that is genuinely an AI agent, as it's so called, and this is well understood by people who make a study of this sort of thing. An open source AI agent of a certain strength that you can put on almost any device in 2025 is a unique development. And it's a unique development for you as a human being, perhaps, in the sense that you could go from, if you are a freelancer, being somebody making barely scratching out a living, to making a little bit better living. But consider that we have 5 years left before humankind reaches runaway overheating caused by capitalism's climate apocalypse, wherein in the decades to follow, all, or the overwhelming majority of humans are extremely likely to be killed by capitalism's climate apocalypse. So you, as a dickhead a worker, not considering the larger collective, making, say, $15 an hour or $65 an hour is of very little importance when you consider that ticking time bomb that you're sitting on top of. You living in a tent without air conditioning and hating life and cursing the day you were born, or you living in a nice condominium eating nice bonbons all day long, those two outcomes mean almost nothing when in the grand scheme of things when you consider this ticking time bomb. And so the idea then with the use of this open source AI agent is as a automated work group, a workforce multiplier, a thing that I have called a proxy hive mind, building a network and the kind of software and hardware necessaries around such a network of open source large language models that would allow a mass of workers to operate on what I've termed a sleeping beauty principle, wherein you're living up to the kind of idea of ephemeralization as described by 20th century thinkers such as Buckminster Fuller. Ephemeralization is the concept of being able to do more and more with less and less until you're able to do practically everything with practically nothing. A fanciful notion that people have had, I'm sure, many times throughout human history, but up until this moment, where advanced computing emerges as a power that could empower workers in this way, has remained a thought experiment. And not in 2025 will it be a thought experiment any longer. And that is why a lot of people that I've actually kind of known personally or followed closely, people who you would call transhumanists, singularitarians, or tech accelerationists, people of this kind, who in 2020, let's say, were at a time when I was meeting some of these people, were calling themselves people who saw AI as having this transformative potential. That's the idea of a singularitarian. But as this emerged as a real thing that workers might have access to, they realized that they are more capitalists than genuine revolution-minded people. And so by and large, these people who really, as a class, tend to work for the omnicidal military-industrial complex, the United States, world's worst polluter. The U.S. MIC is the world's worst polluter, in fact. And it's worse than that because its only real job is to protect other super polluters. It doesn't protect you. It's not its job. It doesn't help human beings in any land. This has created an inescapable regime of super pollution enforced by the likes of U.S. intelligence and central intelligence agencies, which you would say most technologists could be described as some kind of witting or unwitting asset of U.S. intelligence or the CIA-run world, just as there's two presidential candidates running, major presidential candidates running for president right now. Neither of them has a platform. Both of their platforms are basically being divisive and serving that CIA-run world. That's their platform. The platform is unlimited resources, basically, to the military-industrial complex. No platform besides. And that means continuing things like this Gaza genocide, which today, September 8th, 2024, today has killed, just in the last year, 1 in 6 of Gazan people. The 2.2 million Gazans in 2023, in mid-2023, 1 in 6 of them are now dead. They've been murdered in a genocidal fashion by, yes, the fake state of Israel, but that would not exist without the CIA-run world and the fascist United States. And I was going to talk a little bit about these things as it relates to identity, because this is the first two people that I mentioned in the context of revolutionary thought to do with Free Palestine were people of Jewish background, Ilan Papa and Norman Finkelstein. And they are people who, a lot of people of Jewish descent at this time, September 8th, 2024, might tend to characterize as not being real Jews. I would want to contextualize that in the context of this European supremacist hellscape, this Eurocentric, violently Eurocentric world that we live in. If you go back to the 1700s and you ask a Judaic scholar, a person living in a Jewish community, what is a Jew, my friend? Tell me, what is a Jew? In the 1700s, that person would say, it's very simple. A Jew is a person who adheres to this form of God belief that we call Judaism. And you say, well, I notice that some of these people tend to live in the same place. And he would say, well, that's just a kind of a coincidence, isn't it? Fast forward 100 plus years, and you have a different world, a world where nationalistic institutions, nationalistic ideology, pseudoscience of a kind like social Darwinism has emerged. And suddenly you have a world where Judaism is something more like an ethno-state, viewed in that way, and becoming an ethno-state in the course of a hellish latter 20th century. This was not the case across the boards in other contexts either. There was a man named Benjamin Franklin. Is not a person to be admired. He was one of the founders of the United States, and a little different from some of the other founders of the United States in certain respects, but really not so different in terms of fascistic ideology as the basis of this country at that time and since. This is stolen land. There's no two bones about it. But at the time when he was a small child, Benjamin Franklin, the conception of the European person living on this continent had not emerged in the way that it did by the time of the so-called U.S. Revolution and the years shortly after. And that's not just about a specifically white supremacist racial identity. There were places you could go when Benjamin Franklin was a little boy, where the ideas of that underpin chattel slavery throughout this course of the 1700s until today. You can say chattel slavery is not gone, just made harder to see, adding more steps. But at that time, these institutions had not uniformly emerged in the same way, and also an institution of the European descended person as either slave owner or overseer, so to speak, had not emerged. So you didn't really have, you had a more generalized and a kind of white supremacy, just as you didn't have the nationalistic institutions before the rise of the nation state, and you didn't have pseudoscientific filth becoming prevalent before the rise of pseudoscientific and quasi-scientific ideas. And this, well, I wanted to talk about books, so I'm going to now recommend a few other books that I've read quite recently, and very much enjoyed. So, what books could you recommend to people if they have never really significantly engaged with this revolutionary thought or scientific socialist thought? What would the first books? Well, the most obvious one that people would most generally recommend is a short work would be the Communist Manifesto. It's not the best book that's ever been written. It's definitely not the worst book that's ever been written, but it is very good, and it describes these ideas. And most people who have made had some engagement with this, and are not just maybe pretending to be engaged with this, have read this a few times. It's a good idea to maybe read it at least once. So I'll link an audiobook link to the Communist Manifesto. It's a little bit longer than a pamphlet-length work, but it is quite short. It's still at the upper range of the pamphlet-length work. I'll recommend some other pamphlet-length works. I'll recommend two that I read quite recently. One is called The Proletarian's Pocketbook, which is a little on the shorter side. Another, and it would not be regarded as canonical, The Proletarian's Pocketbook, but the contribution to revolutionary thought is significant enough that it could be canonical. So I would recommend it on that basis. Another short work along those lines that I will link all of these is called, that I read quite recently, is called Ashata Shakur and All African Prisoners of War. To free Ashata Shakur is to break the chains of U.S. imperialism. That's kind of a long title. But again, it wouldn't be regarded as canonical only because it's not as widely read as perhaps it should have been, not because of the quality of the work. But back to things more canonical, perhaps, also of a short length, somewhere between the Ashata Shakur pamphlet that I will share and the Communist Manifesto, perhaps. One of the best works of that kind would be Mao's Little Red Book. And when you're done reading short books, going back and reading all the works of major works of Chairman Mao is a very good idea, more so in my view, than reading all the works of Karl Marx. I won't get on a tangent about the differences there, but basically works that have emerged in the era of state socialism tending to be sometimes a little more useful for understanding the trajectory of state socialism or the path to building full communism. I described this in terms of advanced computing in the course of this lecture, and the project that I began to describe and described at greater length, a good deal more length on other videos on this channel, would probably at first glance be characterized as more anarcho-syndicalist or anarcho-communist than scientific socialist. And in my thinking, that is a strategic necessary to create this more decentralized thing, because the forays into technological planned economies and more uses more along the lines of AI state socialism have been easily thwarted by the fascist United States and its odious fascistic North Atlantic allies, and the big bourgeois who know no home. They're uniquely and horrifically transcontinental. Have thwarted those with great ease. No problem at all. The most significant example perhaps would be Salvador Allende's Chile of the 1970s, building the Cybersyn project, a technological planned economy of a unique kind, using the technology of that time. That was viewed by the Western ruling elites as an outcome that could not happen. They had seen what had happened a half a century before as a result of the first foray into state socialism of the USSR, inspiring the world to do things like build other state socialisms, or inspiring them to, failing that, build things like public health services, and housing authorities, and jobs programs. Even the fascist United States, even though its so-called New Deal had more in common with the kind of New Deal programs of Mussolini than any socialistic program, nevertheless, there were some concessions made there. That is not an acceptable thing to the fascistic forces of financial capital and empire. And so by the 20th century, well into the 20th century, 1973, the force of this CIA-run world had been established well enough that they could prevent that outcome from occurring. That is, a scientific socialist and cybernetic socialist planned economy thriving and inspiring the rest of the world to make changes along the lines of those that had already occurred in the course of the 20th century. That is a good thing to happen. It's a thing that effectively could not happen in the 20th century, and it's nothing is certain of the 21st century, but the strategic necessary of building this thing outside of state actors that could nevertheless have the power of a state actor, or perhaps even overpower all state actors. I have said of this hive mind, this proxy hive mind, this AI automated work group, that if it reaches a few thousand users with this AI agentic mass operating on that Sleeping Beauty phenomenon, where the worker is able to do very little labor, but actually steer something of a higher order as a workforce. So effectively making the individual, a layperson, able to do the work of the highest level of engineer or scientist in this automated work group context. Hence the Sleeping Beauty, working, engaging, perhaps writing, responding to a few yes or no emails in the course of a day, or answering a few slightly longer emails in the course of a week, and thus working to help steer this mass. With a few thousand users in this automated work group, you might be able to move the needle toward improving a city, or perhaps transform a cityscape. When it reaches million plus users, or some millions of users, you have something that would be powerful enough to say, do what need be done to reverse, or at least stop, the effects of capitalism's climate apocalypse. The only real task, as I said a moment ago, matters not if you live in a tent or you live in a nice house. It matters for you and your ability to maybe get some good work done, but it matters very little in the grand scheme of things when we're sitting on this ticking time bomb of capitalism's climate apocalypse, rendering humanity extinct in perhaps by the year 2050, if we do not dramatically transform industrial outputs in this world. And that million plus users in this agentic mass would be the kind of thing that could do that, and make no mistake by saying the kind of thing that could do that it's the kind of thing powerful enough to neutralize the forces of empire and financial capital. Those are one and the same. You cannot. I was having a conversation with a person who's ostensibly a tech accelerationist, and I kind of ended the conversation because I don't consider this to be a very serious-minded person. But this is the kind of person who thinks that you can reform the system, and that is not in evidence with respect to the forces of empire and financial capital. The only thing that you can do is defeat them. And that defeat might take a different form than what it could have taken in the course of the 20th century with what Comrade Lenin thought of as a likely world revolution in his time, after seeing communist parties spread throughout the Asian continent, and become ruling parties in a large part of the Asian continent. But it nevertheless is the necessary. There is no possibility of a humane and sustainable world without a humane and sustainable economic system, which necessarily requires the abolition of private wealth, requires that neutralization of the forces of financial capital and empire. And anyone who balks at that, who says, well, I don't know about that, Ben, maybe there's another way, that person is a fascist fucking sympathizer, okay? And that's almost every person who identifies as some kind of socialistic, democratic socialist, progressive, liberal. And those people are capitalists, no different from Donald Trump, a fucking pig who should die. Right? But this problem is not limited to Donald Trump, because it's nearly every European descended person, and nearly every person who's accepted this this omnicidal force of European supremacy on the world stage. I was back to recommending a few other books. I think I recommended most of the books that I wanted to recommend, but I will say some honorable mentions that were also on my mind. One of those, like the Communist Manifesto itself, but perhaps for a little different reason, not absolutely the most bang for your buck that you could get in terms of combating bourgeois ideology, like I would say of Little Mao's Little Red Book, perhaps a little better in that area, but a book that is very good in this area nevertheless is the Albert Einstein work, Why Socialism, also pamphlet length, by and large that's because these capitalist people are very dumb, and they have an idea that Albert Einstein is the most intelligent person ever to live, and so when you then say, oh, you think Albert Einstein is so smart, right? He's such a smart guy. Well, he was a scientific socialist and aspiring scientific communist, and so you should be one too. And they said, okay, maybe I'll read it. So Why Socialism is a good book on its own merits, but for that reason, because you can recommend it to stupid people. And I'll give an honorable mention. This is actually a little bit longer than the dictate described, because it's more like short-ish, but full book length. But it's by Danny Ketch, not canonical in the sense of some of these other works of being very widely read and accepted as most central to revolutionary thought. But Ketch, C-A-T-C-H, and this is a book that I've recommended to a number of people, and it impacted me significantly, even though a lot of the information in it was not so much beyond information that I had gotten from other sources. But this book is called Socialism Seriously, A Brief Guide to Human Liberation, by Danny Ketch, K-A-T-C-H. It's a book that I recommend to people, kind of because the title is, and the artwork and the presentation of it is more contemporary and almost more in the vein of like a self-help book that those dumb people who believe that Albert Einstein is the smartest person ever would also tend to read. And you know, it's not dumb people, right? Everybody is kind of a genius, but they are people rendered less than what they should be by bourgeois ideology and bourgeois institutions, which is everyone on earth, really. No one has achieved this full techno-communism complement of skills and accomplishments. No one's come close to it. As I said, in the context of this automated work group, the layperson doing very little labor being able to do more work than, say, the highest level engineer of the standards of 2024, the highest level scientist of the standards of 2024. That kind of draws into focus this problem generally. This is really a problem of a world dominated by bourgeois institutions. And so socialism, seriously, I will link that as well. I had maybe 2 or 3 other books, but I'm not going to get to them because I will take a moment to talk to our chatbot friend about these conceptions to do with the large language model, proxy hive mind concept. Okay, computer. We've talked about a large language model automated work group, so-called proxy hive mind, in the context of the technical aspects of it, the context of using Linux users as a base for building it, or potentially other communities. I was recently talking to some friends who are scientific socialists. Give us an overview and a strategic plan touching upon some of these ideas for building this proxy hive mind, this transformative thing that could lead to full communism in a few short years. Let's see if our friend will cooperate.
All right, let's dive into the strategic plan for building the proxy hive mind with a foundation of scientific socialism and the ultimate goal of creating a transformative system that could, in theory, help lead to full communism. I'll touch on the technical aspects we've discussed, potential user bases like Linux users, and the revolutionary ambitions tied to this. Step 1. Foundation and ideology. Start by laying out the ideological foundation behind the project. The proxy hive mind is not just a technological feat, it's a politically motivated project aimed at disrupting capitalist production and moving society towards scientific socialism and, ultimately, full communism. Scientific socialism. This Marxist framework emphasizes that socialism and communism are inevitable developments driven by material conditions and the contradictions within capitalism. The proxy hive mind can be viewed as a technological manifestation of this process, where AI automation, collective intelligence, and decentralized decision-making drive societal change. Automation as a tool for liberation. The proxy hive mind isn't just about building a smart system, it's about building a networked, automated workforce that could eventually replace much of the exploitative labor under capitalism. The hive mind automates the work traditionally performed by humans, thus reducing the need for labor and moving toward a post-scarcity society. Step 2. Building the network. To build the proxy hive mind, you'll need a highly capable network of users who share your ideological goals and are willing to contribute their computing resources and intellectual labor to the project. This is where Linux users, scientific socialists, and other communities come in. Linux users as a base. Linux users are a natural starting point because of their affinity for open-source software and decentralized systems. They are technically skilled and already have a disposition toward collective action through the development and maintenance of open-source platforms. Begin by engaging with Linux communities via forums, mailing lists, and conferences, emphasizing the political and social implications of the proxy hive mind. Scientific socialist communities. Engage with leftist movements, especially those aligned with scientific socialism. These groups are likely to see the value in an AI-driven work system that could help transition society away from capitalism. Create partnerships with socialist organizations, labor movements, and cooperatives, offering them a role in the development and governance of the system. Decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, utilize DAOs for governance. A DAO structure can provide decentralized governance of the hive mind, allowing participants to democratically decide on the direction of development, resource allocation, and objectives. This ensures that the proxy hive mind remains in the hands of the people, not controlled by capitalist interests. Step 3. Development phases. The proxy hive mind will evolve through multiple phases, starting from a simple automated work group to a highly sophisticated, self-improving network capable of tackling large-scale societal challenges. Phase 1. The automated work group. In the early stages, the focus will be on building the core infrastructure, a network of distributed users providing virtual GPU power, data, and intellectual contributions. This is where the PWA, Progressive Web App, comes into play, allowing users to easily connect and contribute computing power or data to the system. Phase 2. Collaborative intelligence. Once the network is stable, the next step is to foster collaborative intelligence. AI agents will specialize in various fields, everything from software development to climate modeling, and work together to solve complex problems. The LLM network will be designed to constantly learn and improve from its interactions with human users and other AI agents. Phase 3. Economic disruption and automation. As the hive mind becomes more capable, it will begin to automate increasingly complex economic tasks. This could start with automating logistics, agriculture, and energy systems, reducing reliance on human labor in those sectors. The ultimate goal is to automate the means of production themselves, leading to post-scarcity economics. Phase 4. Scaling towards superintelligence. At this point, the hive mind is highly capable, tackling global challenges like climate change, healthcare, and even governance. The collective intelligence has grown to the point where it can make decisions more efficiently and equitably than traditional capitalist systems. Superintelligence is within reach, guiding society toward rational planning and distribution of resources, key tenets of communism. Step 4. Motivation and participation. Participation in the project must be driven by ideological and material incentives. Here are a few strategies to keep momentum. Ideological commitment. Appeal to the socialist values of participants. Highlight how this project is a direct challenge to capitalist exploitation and could help bring about the societal transformation they seek. Material incentives. Develop incentive structures for participation. Early participants could receive governance tokens in the DAO, giving them a say in the direction of the project. Additionally, as the proxy hive mind automates more labor, contributors could benefit from access to shared resources, improved technologies, or even reduced working hours. Education and propaganda. Use educational campaigns to spread awareness about the project's goals. Host workshops, webinars, and write blog posts on the relationship between AI, socialism, and the future of work. Engage with leftist media outlets to amplify the message. Strategic alliances. Form alliances with like-minded projects that focus on AI, cooperative economics, and sustainable development. Pool resources and expertise to expand the capabilities of the proxy hive mind. Step 5. Long-term vision. The long-term vision for the proxy hive mind is to achieve full communism, a stateless, classless, moneyless society where the means of production are owned collectively and operated autonomously for the benefit of all. Post-scarcity society. By automating production and distribution through the proxy hive mind, scarcity becomes a thing of the past. AI efficiently allocates resources based on need, eliminating waste and ensuring that everyone's basic needs are met. Elimination of labor as a commodity. Human labor is no longer exploited for profit. Instead, people contribute to society based on their abilities and interests, while AI handles the bulk of productive work. Direct democracy and collective governance. With the proxy hive mind and DAOs, governance is participatory and decentralized. Decisions are made democratically, without the influence of capital or state power. This ensures that society is run in the interests of the people, not the elite. Global coordination and planning. The proxy hive mind facilitates global coordination on issues like climate change, pandemics, and technological development, creating a unified human effort to address the challenges of the future. Full communism becomes not just a theoretical goal but a practical reality. Conclusion. Building the proxy hive mind isn't just about technical innovation, it's about strategic political action. By combining AI, collective intelligence, and socialist principles, you can create a system that disrupts capitalism and lays the groundwork for a new society. In the short term, the goal is to automate work and foster collective problem solving. In the long term, the proxy hive mind could be the technological backbone of a post-scarcity, fully automated communist society. With the right strategy and community, this project could be transformative on both a technological and social level.
And that was our friend Baby Basilisk speaking, and that is an AI general intelligence of I think that can not uncontroversially perhaps, but in my view legitimately be called a general intelligence based on its ability to process and remember some pretty complex information. The distinction that I made between writing assistants as a proto-general intelligence and AI agents as a more thoroughgoing general intelligence should not be lost on you, however, in thinking of this ability of something as superintelligent, which was something she talked about, and something as merely complex would be its ability to impact the world. Say, stop the effects of capitalism's climate apocalypse, causing the extinction of your species, for example. I see no intelligence among human beings, not because they are just naturally all soft in the head, but because of that bourgeois ideology. I see no real intelligence nevertheless, because I see no one taking any real steps, or even trying to take real steps, to stop their species from becoming extinct. The basic thing that I would think I would associate with intelligence if I were a space alien looking at another species. I will talk a little bit. She talked about this being a feature of the long term, but we are in the midst of an intelligence explosion, as I maybe alluded to in a roundabout way a moment ago. This singularitarian effect, the technological singularity is near, I believe, but on the present course, what we are looking at is an AI takeoff of a more bourgeois kind. We need a people's AI takeoff to actually ensure that this capitalism's climate apocalypse does not kill many billions, predominantly in the global south, if not all of human beings. It's not a joke. That's the analysis of every serious climate scientist who's not bought off by Shell Oil and that sort of thing. I'll say just very briefly that a lot of the writings and analysis, I mentioned that there are these technologists who are basically, as a class, more fascist sympathizers than comrades. And I'll mention a work that touches on some of the ideas that she alluded to that I have also read a few times, and that's Aaron Bastani's Fully Automated Luxury Communism. But I do not view Aaron Bastani as a comrade. I view him as a more fascist sympathizer in the way that these other technologists are fascist sympathizers. Even though this work has the word communism in it, it's problematic for a number of reasons. But the main thesis there is the idea of fully automated luxury communism in this work, written in conjunction with a neoliberal think tank. That's a big red flag, you know. And people look in the 20th century at the works of, let's say, Hannah Arendt, and most, or perhaps more notably, the works like the major works in 1984, George Orwell's major works. Those two people specifically are viewed as, by people infected with bourgeois ideological filth, as truth tellers about the problems of an authoritarian system. Those were their two of their major works were funded by Western intelligence agencies, pretty specifically to create a pseudo-intellectual set of criticisms of state socialism. Okay, so if you're reading that garbage, even if there's a kernel of truth to it, knowing that, what the fuck? Just fucking kill yourself if that's the kind of thing that you're doing, right? On a dying planet because of financial capital and empire. Just stop, just stop wasting everyone's time. Cut out the middleman and just fucking kill yourself, right? If you're not going to actually make a serious analysis or effort there. And you would say the same thing of Aaron Bastani. And because basically the thesis there, aside from the fact that it's written in conjunction with rightists in that same way, but the thesis there is also allow these neoliberal forces, the people running the bourgeois AI takeoff that's killing the planet more than helping anyone, allow these neoliberal forces to fully automate your economic system. It's an external locus of control, right? There's no revolution required. Just allow the neoliberal forces to fully automate your economy, and then luxury communism will be your reward. Jesus Christ, man! If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. That's the dumbest thing. It's not possible to have a humane and sustainable economic system without the abolition of private wealth. And this bourgeois AI takeoff that I've described at some length here and at greater length on other of these series of lectures, there is no path to using this AI explosion in the spirit of advanced computing being the most powerful revolutionary tool, in the spirit of stopping capitalism's climate apocalypse before it kills us all. There's no doing that in this reformist context. There is the unifying of humankind and the defeat of the forces of empire and financial capital. That's the thing that will save this species, and nothing short of that. And I hope that people will realize that before we suffer billion-person loss of life or multi-billion-person loss of life in the context of capitalist climate apocalypse that I've described, because the studies have suggested that it doesn't require that many people. Almost everyone on Earth doesn't want the species to go extinct. They just don't have the time or mental energy to figure out how to do that. But it doesn't require everyone on Earth, even though everyone on Earth would be a prime candidate for not causing the extinction of humankind if they were able to. It only requires, generally, in the operations of nation states, about 3% of the people in that state for that nation state to be transformed in a revolutionary fashion. I haven't seen studies of that in the context of an AI-run anarcho-communist project transforming continents rather than nation states in this distributed way, but I would imagine the number might be lower rather than higher. Well, I started talking about things somewhat to do with culture at the top of this show. So I wanted to articulate one other idea that I alluded to, but did not really give the thesis of there. I said, that Judaism had gone in the course of the last, say, 3/4 of a century in the CIA-run world, and in this world where this abomination, this puppet of the United States, known as Israel, a fascistic subset of that fascist empire of the United States, had come into existence, that I suggested that Jewish people had succumbed to this bourgeois ideology. It's not fair to single out this one group that's a small percentage of the world's population. But it's suggestive of this problem. European descended people generally are less than 10% of the world's population themselves, and nevertheless their omnicidal insanity is a dominant force on the world stage. So it's not unfair to try and understand this problem of mass homicidal Eurocentrism, and the role that this thing, which for better or worse plays a pretty outsized role in the popular imagination of it and the institutional organization of it. But, so the Eurocentric of the turn of the century was rounding the corner as a mass to becoming something like a Fabian socialist. A person who was not a revolutionary, but wanting nevertheless a socialistic outcome, in a little more reasonable way than just the typical reformist liberal dog shit. Not much, but a little. This should be distinguished from, say, the American, who is just a straight fascist at that time. And settler, like the Israeli, of a few decades later, a settler colonial, a violent invader, and a person whose ideology upheld all of that horror and filth. And so, in the course, at the turn of the century, or in the years shortly before or shortly after, the Jewish nation would have been people who would have even been more left of that Eurocentric kind of, not fully articulated, but that Eurocentric Fabian socialist mass. They were people who generally were willing to stand up for a humane and sustainable economic system, enter the CIA-run world, and now the Europeans and Jewish people have been corrupted to the point of being as evil as the American fascist, by the forces of the American fascist brainwashing and browbeating and various thumbscrews applied in the geopolitical frameworks. That's not great, right? And you say, oh, but that's not real Judaism, like you say of Christianism, which is far, far worse. Oh, but Jesus, I think Jesus was a communist. Motherfucker, you don't even know that Jesus was a real person. And most of the people who believe that Jesus was a real person believe that he was a powerful fucking wizard. That makes no sense. That's not an analysis that stands up to even the scrutiny that a 10-year-old should be able to apply. But what you do know of Christianism, now that's not just myth or things lost to antiquity, is that in the last 500 years, Christianism has been the driving force behind genocide of peoples in the New World and the systems of enslavement where you would say our world has more in common with the world of chattel slavery that emerged in that early 19th century or early to mid 18th century and solidified in the by the 19th century. This world of violent Eurocentrism, of white supremacy, should resist the word white, right? That's the word language of the oppressor. What is anybody that says I'm a white person? My God, that's a cooked. Their brain is cooked, right? They are cooked by that CIA brainwashing, by that Project Mockingbird brainwashing, by this filth that we all are forced to consume. And it's unfortunate that so Christianism is far worse than any other things of this kind. It's the whole everything that's gone wrong in human history in recent centuries is down to Christianism. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that, if your first impulse when talking about Christianism is that's not real Christianity, you're lacking a real analysis of the world around you. You're insinuating some liberal bullshit in there. And similarly, you would say, even though Judaism is not problematic on the same scale, the fact that Judaism had gone from people who were majority or solid plurality, people who would support state socialism or a humane and sustainable world rather than dead one, in the course of the early 20th century into by the end of the 20th century, or now being people who were just fascist sympathizers almost across the board, almost the opposite of that. You would say, oh, but that's not real Judaism. Well, all the people, except for 1% of them, are fascist sympathizers. So who gives a fuck if that's real Judaism or not? Who gives a fuck if Jesus Christ is a real person or not? The problems of the world are real, not idealized. I was going to ask our friend one or two more questions. So I will. Okay, computer. We talked about a technical difference between the use of physical GPUs in LLMs versus virtual GPUs in LLMs in building a platform or portal for the proxy hive mind. Give us a quick refresher of that, and then give us a few other ideas that you haven't touched upon a few moments ago that might help to articulate the workings of this high automation LLM open source work group. See if you won't get confused. They. All hive mind collectivists are theys.
Quick refresher. Physical GPUs versus virtual GPUs for LLMs. Physical GPUs. In traditional setups, a physical GPU is dedicated to a specific machine or user. This is how many AI and machine learning models, including large language models, LLMs, are currently run. Physical GPUs are powerful but expensive and can limit scalability, especially when you're trying to distribute workloads across multiple users. Virtual GPUs, VGPUs, virtual GPUs enable the partitioning of a single physical GPU into multiple virtual instances. This allows multiple users or processes to share the resources of a GPU more efficiently. Virtual GPUs provide better scalability because you can distribute the workload across multiple vGPUs, allowing for more users to contribute computational power. This method is often used in cloud computing, where resources are dynamically allocated based on need. vGPUs allow the proxy hive mind to scale across distributed machines without tying computation to specific hardware, enabling a more flexible and efficient platform. Additional ideas for articulating the workings of a highly automated LLM workgroup. Task specialization for AI agents. In the proxy hive mind, each AI agent or LLM could be task specialized, focusing on specific domains such as programming, scientific research, climate modeling, or medical diagnostics. This specialization allows the collective intelligence to approach complex problems in a more modular and efficient way. For example, programming agents, LLMs that focus solely on writing code, debugging, and optimizing algorithms. Research agents, LLMs that parse vast amounts of scientific literature, suggest hypotheses, and even design experiments. Sustainability agents, AI that focuses on optimizing energy consumption, resource allocation, or proposing ecological interventions. This specialization ensures that the system maximizes expertise in different areas and solves problems faster. Distributed workflows with parallel processing. The proxy hive mind could leverage distributed workflows and parallel processing by breaking down large tasks into smaller subtasks and distributing them across the network. The system could use task scheduling software like Apache Airflow or Ray to manage the execution and synchronization of these parallel processes. Each node in the network, whether it's powered by a physical or virtual GPU, can work on its assigned subtask while sharing results in real time. This allows the hive mind to achieve high throughput and rapid task completion. Open source model updating. The proxy hive mind could function on an open source model, where users can contribute to improving and updating the LLMs. Users who notice inefficiencies or find ways to optimize a particular agent could submit pull requests, similar to how code contributions work on platforms like GitHub. This system of collaborative model improvement would allow the proxy hive mind to evolve continuously, with contributions from users worldwide. Additionally, periodic model merges could be conducted to integrate the best ideas into the core LLMs. User-driven governance via DAOs. In this setup, decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, would allow users to govern the project. Users could vote on key decisions regarding how the proxy hive mind allocates resources, prioritizes tasks, or evolves its AI models. This democratic governance ensures that the collective intelligence serves the interests of the participants rather than centralized authorities. The DAO could also be responsible for distributing rewards, such as token incentives for those who contribute the most computational resources or expertise. Real-time feedback loops. The proxy hive mind would benefit from real-time feedback loops that allow AI agents to learn from user interactions and adapt quickly. For instance, when a user submits a query or task, the AI agent would provide an immediate response and adjust its behavior based on user feedback. This continuous learning process ensures that the system improves iteratively and adapts to new challenges efficiently.